What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about sampling drum breaks and turning it into some kind of trip hop vibe, kind of like so. So if you haven't seen it already, this is my submission for day 9 of the 30-day challenge. But what I wanted to do was kind of just break down how I got these drums, because even though I did sample them, they're very different than when I recorded them. And I also finally had a chance to use my trusty analog heat in order to get that really nice grit and texture. So before we get started, you don't have to have an analog heat, although some analog gear really truly helps the process of this. But let's go ahead and talk about the main layers, and then I'll show you how I've kind of recreated something relatively similar, and it really isn't that many steps. So the first main layer that I have here is this guy right here, and that sounds like this. And the subsequent drum breaks from below were all processed through the same effect chain. So if I were to pull this up, there is this little guy, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut this right here because I wanted to show you what the chain looked like while I was recording. And basically all I did was this right here, which was the analog heat, which just had some distortion and some compression on it. And then we had some transient shaping. We had a fuse compressor that was pulling up some of the high end on here, and then we have a clipper at the end. And if you kind of unfold this and you look at the recordings of the clean version here, you'll see that there's a bunch of different breaks that I've pulled out. So and you can see that they're really dirty, and that's actually really useful to our advantage, because when we get into time stretching this and making it fit within a particular tempo, that's when the real magic starts to happen. So an example of that, whenever you have some kind of acoustic drum break, so to speak, so we can take this and we can try to conform this into a specific thing. Now you can see here that it's already relatively close, so what we can do is we can just time stretch this kind of like so. And this is a relatively easy tempo to work with, if you will, because I think that it's closer to the 77 BPM. But if we were to take this and set this warp mode to repitch, you're going to notice that the timbre of it is going to move around a little bit. So, and then let's go ahead and take that, and then what we might want to do is even double it. So this should be really slow now. All right, so maybe not quite, but and if we were to make this a little bit slower, perhaps say like 60 BPM. So we're close, maybe not quite with that, but so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stretch this out just a little bit more to where we have that hit on there, and now we should be really close to being in time. So So if we were to process this, if you wanted to use this for your main break, then we can pretty much like apply the same kind of processing that we did on that original signal, which is some EQ, which I guess I'm not doing anything, but a fuse compressor, a transient control, and clipping. So one aspect would be to just copy this and go paste, and let's see what this sounds like now. Now without it. So using this as your main layer is definitely viable. Now I would definitely say, like, don't be afraid to layer, especially if you're sampling a bunch of breaks. And that's what I did with these little guys over here, because I've used this as the main layer, then I used this to kind of be on top, and you'll specifically notice how much bigger the snare becomes whenever we get to designing this. So I'm going to go back here until we pull back on the analog heat very quickly. There we go. So that way when we get to the superior drummer part, then we can kind of talk about what's going on there. But if you take a listen to the main break that we have here, which is, right, it's already got a pretty nice snare, but whenever we start to layer this with the other elements here, so it's just a little bit of character on top, and that really kind of makes it go. And if you notice, these aren't really even super in time, so. This one is just an EQ. And I think for the most part, that's what this one is as well, except for making it a little bit louder. But really, I'm just taking out the low end to move space and really let the kick kind of shine through. But that's really all you have to do in order to get those really nice, crispy sounding drums. Now, I will say that because I'm using an analog machine, you'll notice that there's a lot of noise on top. And by default, if we take a listen to this, whenever this starts playing with the... Hold on one second, let me back up to here. You'll see that there's some noise floor that's starting to come up, and that's actually not a bad thing. So if we were to take this drum break that we have, which is from Superior Drummer, let's go over here to just this and solo this. This is a relatively similar undo. Open up this, because I don't think that we drag this out, but I'll just play this. Which by default it actually sounds louder, and the reason why is because on the mixer we've got just transient shapers on all of these buses, so there's that. But whenever we start to add the analog heat, we actually get some gain reduction on here. And so if we turn on the compressor here, which I think that this actually just reset itself, so we might want to maybe just design this, I guess, is something that we could do. So let's turn this off for now, and we're going to go ahead and apply some of this drive and analog heat, and I'll show you an alternative after this. You can just do it on here as well. Just a little bit of high end. You can see it's a little bit too dirty now. Let's go to... Now, if we really want to make this loud, one thing that we can do is we can add some compression, and we might want to add the compressor beforehand. So really, this doesn't behave like a typical compressor. You're going to kind of have to listen to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the highest ratio and turn up the threshold on here, and maybe just adjust the attack ever so slightly and start pushing the gain up. Now we got some boom. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to back off of this and leave that as half. Now we can actually turn the gain up. Or we can try to do it on the other side. This will make this louder. If you're using just the clean boost and nothing else, I have the dirt on so it won't do that, and also the EQ, but if you just have clean boost on, it will actually clip. But if we start to... Now we're getting really nice and punchy. So the next thing would be that fuse compressor, because we're kind of making this a little bit dirty. And you can hear how the noise floor is being picked up, almost like there's a mic on it now. So let's go ahead and make it even louder with our newfangled saturate, which is just clipping. And now we can turn on the disc tube culture. So you can see here that just from doing a couple of different effects, and I would say if you don't have an analog heat plus effects, then I guess an alternative would be to use a couple of instances of disc tube culture along with some kind of glue compressor. So doing that same trick that I was showing you from before, if we were to take this and, hold on, I gotta set this to go on this little guy again, on the grooves. If we were to play with this around like -8 to 12, somewhere around here, set everything to max except for this one, 10, clip on, and we just drive this until it starts to break. now we'll just back off. So now just make sure that you have rolling sampler or something and just pull out whatever version that was, kind of like so, and then you should be relatively good to go. And even though this was in time, if we were to change this into a different mode perhaps, so let's say we set this to repitch, and I'll just replay this one here. And we just set this to repitch, and then we turn the BPM down to maybe like 60 or so, then you're going to hear that feeling that we're looking for. So and if there's too much air or too much of the noise, you can use a transient shaper to pull back off of this. And so now if you have a bunch of different breaks and you want to add in that layering per se, so even if we were to take something like this and start stacking those on top of each other, we probably don't want to use this one because it's got a lot of hits, right? It has a little bit of a different groove. So if we just were to set this here, and maybe there, and then just the snare, so something like this. Let's see what that sounds like. Or what we can even try to do is layer the snare up, so it would probably be I guess it's another kick, so, and it's right there, I believe. So if we were to maybe just grab that, and then there we go. It's got a little bit too much of a swing, so we don't necessarily want to try to fill that in, but if we just kind of set that there. And then maybe if we were to even kind of grab some kind of loop right here. Then there you go. So hopefully that was insightful and helpful with making random trip hop drums. I covered this before with the Silent Hill type things of just doing this from scratch, but as I get better at these, I like to share little techniques and updates I've found that make this kind of work together. But the secret sauce is just EQ, compression, some kind of tape saturation. You can get one from Melda for free if you need something like that, or just add something that's going to give you a little bit of like pseudo noise floor. You can even just use some kind of like vinyl noise or something under it as a layer. But I like that. I like when you're sending these effects into something that already has that hissing / buzzing. I suppose you can also use like a ring mod or erosion or something in order to give it that fuzz. But yeah, hopefully that was somewhat insightful, and I have been trying to figure this out for a really long time, and I think that up until this point, this is probably as close as I've gotten with the full range sounding stuff. So thank you all so much. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out alchemy.com.